Hey, I'm Connor.
And we're Friend Stream Sports. We're real friends who talk about real sports in real time. And there's some real big news to break right now, Connor. What do you have to share with the world?
And some real journalism from the Friend Stream Sports just came over the wire. Devonte Smith has become the third wide receiver and the first since Desmond Howard to be the winner of the Heisman Trophy. So beating quarterbacks Kyle Trask, Trevor Lawrence, and Mac Jones. Rutledge, what's your take?
I like it. I rewatched the highlight film of Bama Notre Dame, and I couldn't get behind Mac Jones winning it because Mac Jones. I have a take on Mac Jones, but with him winning, I'm so glad because he's just a dominant absolute force, and he's going to be incredible to watch. He's going to be a top 10 draft pick going into Sunday. So it's huge to see that. I couldn't get behind Mac Jones winning the Heisman because Mac Jones wasn't, he was good, but he wasn't that like special first year pop up out of nowhere like when Johnny Manziel and Tim Tebow won the Heisman type of quarterback to where it's like, oh, this person's different and this person's special. So congratulations to him.
And, yeah, I think I was not interested in seeing Mac Jones win the Heisman. Be interested to see how the voting went down because I would have thought that there would have been a lot of vote splitting between Jones and Smith, with Trevor Lawrence, kind of being the next man up, if you will,
Hmm.
to complete his great career of only two losses. Everyone is very, and we're going to be getting to this very soon, but everyone seems to be all up in arms about Trevor Lawrence losing what's probably his last game of the year. But you know what? You're allowed to lose to LSU and Ohio State throughout your college career. If those are your only two losses, that's not too bad.
That's not too bad. By the way, welcome to our viewer Luke. Luke is on, and he likens Devontae Smith to both like Amari Cooper and Julio Jones for just really intense Alabama receivers that are going to do a lot. So hey, Luke, thank you for coming out. Connor, besides, so as you said, that's the only loss for Trevor Lawrence was against Ohio State. What did you think of that playoff game and getting a really good eye test of Ohio State against finally a good team?
I'm sure our dear friend Luke was very, very happy. But yeah, they had the Ohio State has looked at some, probably watched some headlines, saw some locker room clippings, and figured enough was enough. Dabo Swinney gave Ohio State a lot of reasons to come out with extra juice outside of just being in the playoffs. But the real story, as so many people were talking about, was Trey Sermon, a guy who a couple weeks ago, before the Big Ten title game, we not too many people could probably identify outside of Ohio and Oklahoma, where he started his career. Now between a monster Big Ten title game and a big time college football playoff game, the Buckeyes have a chance to win it all. So, I think it says a lot about the ACC, and I think that unfortunately for ACC fans, there's going to be a lot of questions to the conference as a whole.
I agree with that because what did we say forever about Notre Dame, which was Notre Dame has soft schedules because they don't play in a conference, and now they're in a conference, they lose that conference championship game, but they get blown in the playoffs, and the person that beat them in their conference championship game also gets blown. So kudos to Ohio State for winning because they really sort of saved the Big Ten, and the ACC has a lot of work to do. Florida State needs to bounce back. North Carolina did not need to get beat as bad as they did against Texas A&M, so they could be the bottom of the Big Five conferences going forward, which could be good for the Pac-12 and the Big 12.
That could definitely give some good credit to those conferences for sure. Although, as money is very important, it is a big year to note that because Notre Dame was a part of the ACC, their college football playoff spoils, if you will get shared throughout the ACC. So, definitely definitely Clemson left a lot of questions on the table, but so did Notre Dame, Rutledge.
Notre Dame really did. It's kind of, is this Brian Kelly's legacy? That's probably that wasn't a pick. Notre Dame really left so much on the table. They, well, Not this. I thought about this in the shower today because we were going to talk about this. The Notre Dame game last week when we talked about it, I just quit doing the show. You talked about inside zone, and I just started running inside zones because I was losing Madden so badly. So we're not surprised. But is this kind of Brian Kelly's legacy that we beat a very beatable schedule and then we go and lose to somebody big? As in, with the same way they've lost many of their big bowl games. He hasn't beaten that really big opponent. Their closest one was when they played Georgia a couple years back when Georgia went up there, but I'm not surprised, and I think this is really going to sting for Notre Dame for the long term. How do you feel about the Irish?
Yeah, I think that the Irish, I think that it was really good for them to make the playoffs again, be another year that Notre Dame is in the college football playoffs. I think it's funny, there's more and more coaches that even in press conferences are stating the obvious of, I lost to Notre Dame. Everybody loses, or not, pardon me, not lost to Notre Dame. I lost to Alabama. Everybody loses to Alabama. Why are you mad about that? So I think that, there's some issues there. I think it is interesting to note, though, that, I was a guy that was very adamant on Notre Dame wasn't just going to lose, but lose by a lot. Let's give a little bit of props. Notre Dame did cover the spread with that late touchdown, so it all wasn't totally lost. But I think that just the offense of Notre Dame could not exploit what the defense of Alabama had. Right, this defense of Alabama is not totally impenetrable, but to penetrate this Alabama defense, you do need a lot of dynamic playmakers, and it's good to have, you got to have one tight end, that can make some, create some matchup issues and things like that. But if that's all you're really focused on and worried about and preparing for as a group of tight ends with the athletes that Alabama's going to have, and the fact of how quickly they rally to the football, it's not going to be a winning success on the offensive side of the ball. So I think that I'm very close to a first down for the old con man here. For our podcast listeners, I am the Jacksonville Jaguars tonight, and Rutledge is the Jets. But no, I think Notre Dame was in a position that a lot of teams would have liked to have been in, make the college football semifinal, and with the recruiting restrictions, just by having an academic power that Notre Dame is, I think that, you can only have such high expectations there for the Fighting Irish. But hats off to them. They played hard. They just kind of got beat by a much better Alabama team.
They really did, which is very sort of normal. And you play to win the game, which is tonight's theme for the show. Shout out to Steven. Steven the Steady is here once again on Tuesday. Hi, Steven. Thank you for coming out. Luke and Steven in the comments made good points that Notre Dame will be in the ACC for this year unless COVID protocols remain in place, and they will remain in a conference. If not, they will go back to being independent. You can tell it's Jacksonville versus Jets when we throw what looked like a first quarter pick and it gets dropped.
A lot of drops.
A lot of drops tonight. We appreciate you watching this on Twitch. This is going to be a long day. But let's keep going through it. Someone who had a long day was North Carolina, because Texas A&M had something to prove, and they proved it. And how? I know that North Carolina and Mac Jones wanted to come out and show they were something, but Jimbo Fisher, that team played angry, and they just took it all to them. So where do you rank Texas A&M for next year, Connor? Also giving that Trevor Lawrence is going away.
Yeah, they do lose their quarterback, Kellen Mond. Jimbo has put together a few pretty solid recruiting classes, which I think is going to be really important. I think early returns, I mean, if A&M is outside of the top 15, that's going to be an issue. I think especially the way that A&M finished the season. They feel like a top 10 kind of team. We're going to be talking about tiers of teams here later on in the show. But, yeah, Texas A&M feels like that top 15 or top 10 team. Not only did they finish the season well, but it was not exactly a blowout heading into the fourth quarter. And this team finished strong. They ran the ball really well. They kind of have, although they're they can look like a spread team, getting the ball out, things like that. they're pretty old school in that they want to possess the ball, they want to run the football, they want to have time of possession, and really play complementary football. And I think that Texas A&M is, at least next year, going to have high hopes, which for Aggie fans is an issue because one of the things in College Station is whenever there's high hopes for the Aggies, that season usually does not end the way that it started. So hopefully A&M can break that curse, but, you know, tis to be seen.
Steven and Luke have A&M possibly being a top 10. I'm putting them on top 5. I think they will be a big, big deal going into next year. As we get ready to finish this first quarter talk, going through, what does our bowl pick contest look like, Connor?
Our bowl pick, I have, well, let's start with who's in last. How about that?
Who's in last?
And coming up, tied with nobody for last place is Rutledge.
Hey, wait, can we respect my Kentucky pick? Because I got that Kentucky pick.
You did pick Kentucky. Who would have thought that the ACC would have been so horrible throughout this bowl season?
Let's put that Kentucky pick on the fridge, boys and girls. We're proud of that one.
That's a pretty low watermark if Kentucky was on the fridge. But Rutledge and the Fighting Kentucky Wildcats are last with 11. I am tied with Steven at 13 points. The Clemson loss created a real big issue for us. And Luke, by picking Ohio State, along with other games, but most notably picking Ohio State, is in the lead with 14 points. So very, very close. There is a chance for a three-way tie if Alabama beats Ohio State, as Luke did pick Ohio State to be the champion.
So remember out there, to everyone playing along, that our prize for winning is a guest spot on Friendstream Sports, where you come out and you play video games with us and you talk sports with us. So good luck. I look forward to whoever wins. Maybe it's me. You know, maybe I make a comeback.
Right? You know, I'm not that good at math, but I don't know if that's mathematically possible.
I can take over the contest from here if you want. I got it.
You could, yes. There could be some changing of picks.
Maybe.
Oh my goodness.
All right.
Well, speaking of changing picks, let's talk about coaches changing teams.
Yeah, the big hire was Steve Sarkisian got hired to Texas, or Sharkisian if you spell his name wrong on your show notes. But Steve Sarkisian is taking the realm again. For anyone that doesn't know Steve Sarkisian, his first major coaching position was at the University of Washington, where he made some noise up there in the Pacific Northwest. Then he was at USC. Then he had to walk away from that position. He did some work a lot with his big last one was Alabama, and now he's at Texas. So the man's got the reins. He's got the Longhorns by the reins. What do you think he's walking into, Connor?
Well, what's interesting was Tom Herman he was able to put together some top recruiting classes. He was able to get some players into the program. It kind of felt like almost potentially a year early of pulling that trigger, but at the University of Texas, I mean, it is if you have one booster that is done with you, I mean, that's the nail in the coffin. And I think that is very evident of what happened. You had, I don't know if it was one or just a very few amount of boosters that were willing to pay that buyout for Tom Herman, but man, they did that. And I think obviously having the two of the top four finalists for the Heisman Trophy, very important. I think, and I think Texas is just ready to be relevant again, and they've been knocking on the door.
I agree, and I think that Sarkisian's offense is what they need, or his style is what they need to fight against Oklahoma, because that throw the ball deep, beef up a lot of people, run some stats is definitely going to do well inside of the Big 12. So, as we break that down, and congratulations to him, we also want to talk about major college football programs. So as we get into this, here's our criteria for what makes a major college football program. They have to have a good history, so a history of winning and a lot of traditions. They have to have facilities. They have to have brand presence and alumni, which in short means not just seeing their stuff in like a Walmart, but when you walk around on a Saturday, you see the shirts of this team walking around you wherever you are. And we're judging them by having success over the past 10 years in recruiting and on the field. So Connor, um, oh, and then we're going to kind of talk about what keeps them major. So Connor, give me one of your teams, then I'll give you one of mine. Who is a top tier team for you?
Well, I'll pick the low-hanging fruit. Obviously, we're living in an Alabama world, and I think that is not very good by my tight end there. That totally missed the route.
This is a top draft pick game.
This is the number one draft pick game. But no, I think Alabama obviously number one. 6 college football playoff appearances. Have been in the top 10 in recruiting every year for the past 5 years. They've just got a factory, first-round draft picks all over the place, playing for another national championship. I mean, if Nick Saban watches out, he might be seen as the greatest Alabama coach of all time. So, yep, that's my clear number one program in the country.
So my number one, I'll give my number one, then my number two. My number one is also Alabama. If it wasn't for 2 rushing quarterbacks being Cam Newton and Johnny Manziel, they would have, and a weird field goal return at Jordan-Hare Stadium, they would have won a lot more games and have a lot more rings. They're consistent. They're in the top 5 recruiting, if not at the top. They take a quarterback like Mac Jones, let him sit for his career. He gets 1 year starting, and then all of a sudden he's a contender for the Heisman Trophy along with a receiver. The Atlanta Falcons receiver core is all Alabama players. Is that a pick?
Pick, baby.
Oh, can I challenge that? We're going to try to challenge that.
And while you challenge that, I will share.
I can't challenge that.
Oh, well then you keep talking.
Well, anyways, so everything, they're in top of recruiting. They run the table. When you play Bama, it's on TV. You're always the underdog, so that is, plus their facilities are incredible. I saw 24/7 Sports has a great thing of different facilities out there, and Alabama's is probably one of the best. And they have a great alumni base that's going to spend money. They will give, thank you, that's a pick back to me. They'll give money where money is needed. So my number one pick is Alabama. Anything else on Alabama?
I wish they weren't as good as they are.
Right there's just, it'll be interesting to see what happens when Mrs. Saban says it's time to walk away.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, I think another team that, it's the 2 teams we've been talking about, and if you listen to the radio, it's almost a problem for college football. Is the only team who's in the same class as Alabama, the only other team with as many college football playoff appearances as Alabama with 6 is Clemson, right? They haven't had all 5 of the past 5 years in the top 10 in recruiting, but man, they've been great. They've been great where they've needed to have been great, right? They've been great at quarterback. They've had big-time defenses. They've played for national titles. They have been in it, and they have been asking questions at the very end of the season. So, and Rutledge, I don't know, please jump in on some Clemson, but for me, I think in the very, very tip-top tier of college football, I think that's where you draw the line for the A-plus programs.
I actually disagree with the second, if we're doing 1 through 5 like as an order. My second pick is actually Ohio State. I have Clemson as a top tier program, but Ohio State has clearly owned, and I'm sure Luke is going to be very happy to hear me say this, but Ohio State has clearly owned the entire Midwest. There's a reason why the entire conference is horrible, is because all the kids are at Ohio State. Michigan, which used to have good recruits until Harbaugh showed that he couldn't do it, they're going to Ohio State. Every time you walk around, what do you see and hear? Ohio State. So I have that. I think Clemson is top tier, but I put Ohio State above them. They've also made a bunch of playoff appearances. Urban Meyer built a really good depth, and Ryan Day is showing that it's not a fad, that they're still keeping that culture.
Yep, and I would put Ohio State as number 3, I think, for some of the reasons that you mentioned, right? Kind of, I think, program-wise, sort of owning the Midwest. Not just that, but the fact that they're able to go get players from not just in the Midwest. They're a national brand, right? I think that's the big important thing. And I think that has helped them in their recruiting, and I think that has helped them stay relevant. And, I think if it weren't for their playoff game last year against Clemson, not this year's rendition, but last year's rendition, where Clemson had that major comeback, I'd probably have Ohio State as number 2. So very, very close, and I think that Ohio State definitely can be and has no reason to drop out of that A type program for sure.
I agree. I want to kind of get to our second tier, but my other 3 top ones that I want to see. So you were saying Bama, Ohio State, and Clemson as your top 3. My 5 in order are Bama, Ohio State. I have Oklahoma because of their continued playability, and LSU because the chairs are beds and their couches and their beds all at the same time. And then Clemson. But with LSU, I want to take a second to defend that. If we remember when, before Ed Ogeron, even when LSU and people were questioning the head coach and everything, and they made that move, they were still winning 10 games, and they were still a presence to reckon with. They were just getting absolutely manhandled by Alabama. But one year they even got to play Alabama twice in the championship game when they lost, which is what Texas A&M wish would have happened. So I have LSU as a program. What's your entire top 5, top programs?
So top programs: number 1, Alabama, as I mentioned. Number 2, Clemson. Number 3, Ohio State. Number 4, Oklahoma, as sort of a Ohio State of the Big 12 region. And then number 5, I think Notre Dame is still that top tier program. I think that there is a definite drop off after between number 4 Oklahoma and Notre Dame, but Notre Dame is still very, very important in the college football rankings and in that process.
I like the Notre Dame pick, but I actually have it in our second category. And Connor and I call our second category, these are top programs that are on the way, or as Connor likes to call it, these are your new money teams. They are not the historic, all the ones that we listed, but they're making moves. So my 5 second tier on the way programs are Texas A&M, Oregon, Georgia, based off the fact that they've had some playoff appearances and can recruit. Current Florida now with Dan Mullen. And then I have Notre Dame just because of the fact that they'll run the table in their schedule, but they cannot beat the big opponent. So they can recruit, they can get people, but they just can't beat the big ones. So who are your new money top tier programs that are just on the rise?
It's interesting that you call the program with Newt Rockne and all the history of Notre Dame
and the history
new money.
Yeah, they're nowadays new money.
Yeah, I think that Oregon is definitely in that mix. I put LSU is in that mix of quote new money. I think that I think that the difference between kind of the top tier, top 5, and in my opinion, it's really 4. Sans Notre Dame, and then this second tier is teams that can go around beating each other and teams that will always lose to the top tier, right? LSU has every now and again, LSU can have success against Alabama probably at roughly the same clip it feels like that Auburn has success against Alabama. Every now and again they'll clip them for sure, but most of the time that's a series dominated by Alabama. But I think you have Oregon in that kind of right knocking on the doorstep. I think you have Texas A&M. I do think that the Florida Gators, due to their proximity to top recruits, are a team that definitely can continue to put it together. And I think that Georgia, for some of those same reasons, being more of a regional power and in relation to top recruits, with an administration that wants that football success, I think puts them in that next tier after those top teams.
So we definitely have our second tiers very in common, where we differ on a couple. We just really differ on Notre Dame.
The old Irish.
It just depends on the year. I think with them, if they're good, like this year they were good, but when they slip, they just slip really far. For our viewers out there, Steven's top 5 programs of all time are in the past 10 years, Ohio State, Alabama, Notre Dame, USC, and Georgia, which I can get behind seeing USC and Georgia because, like you said, they're regional power consistency. Luke has Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, Oklahoma, and Notre Dame because of Rudy. Luke likes Rudy. We all like Sam. He was great. Okay, so Connor, that brings us to wrapping up those categories in that discussion. Now we're going to take it into our halftime hot take. What is our halftime hot take this week on Friends Stream Sports?
In the vein of Steve Sarkisian going from USC to Alabama to now Texas, 3 pretty much dream jobs. Our question is, what is if you were to take the reins of any Division One or college football program outside of obviously the Wheaton College Thunder or the Georgia Southern Eagles, what would be your dream coaching job for you to take?
Mine would be, if I couldn't pick those, my dream coaching job would be USC, and I mean the University of Southern California, because it's a top recruiting area. You're going to get lots of support. You're going to live in LA. You're going to have that kind of celebrity lifestyle, but you're in a big city to where you get to have your anonymity. You're not, everyone knows who you are and what you're doing all the time. Um, you're in a region to where you can even pull players from Hawaii. So you have just a huge region worth of recruits. And the lifestyle, when USC is good, college football is better. And if you're that big flavor USC coach, that's a big statement for you to be. So I'd pick USC. I'd move to California.
You'd move to Cali.
Yeah.
There, well, in a very similar type fashion, my dream coaching job, and this does hurt a little bit, being kind of like in those Florida State Seminoles, but if I were to take over a job, I would love to be the head coach of the Miami Hurricanes. I think that for similar reasons to you, right? You're not the only show in town. You've got multiple pro franchises. There is definitely pressure involved, but it's a different kind of pressure than if you were in Tuscaloosa or if you were in Happy Valley or if you were in Clemson, South Carolina. I think that the alumni base for Miami is very interested in making sure that program is good, right? Was it Vince Wilfork bought the first turnover chain?
Yeah, he did.
So, I think that's awesome, right? And I think that there's a good culture and good family surrounding that. I think that, it'd be a fun life in a big city with good recruiting, great recruiting base. A little tech malfunction as my earpiece popped out there. My apologies.
Oh, we're good. It's real sports in real time.
Real sports, real time, real tech malfunctions. And I think that is I think Miami would be a lot of fun to be at, especially if you were good. Just like any coaching job would be if you're good.
Right. I think that'd be good. Miami could be cool. You definitely have to watch out for the real Hurricanes, not just your own. Our viewers, Luke and Steven. Luke says outside of Ohio State, he would say either Notre Dame or Georgia. And Steven, I like Steven's pick. He says, I would actually take FAU. Boca is a great area, and it's a little less pressure than a Power 5 job. Or Luke and Steven would also jump on the UCF bandwagon and go Knights. But I think that could be kind of cool, is sort of, I like it to head coach Willie Fritz of Tulane. His last job was Georgia Southern, but he picked up and moved because sometimes you just have to live a lifestyle. So, but I know, Connor, if Wheaton called you tomorrow, I'd have to help you pack your house and move to Illinois.
That it'd be very sad, but I'd be very close to the greatest nacho plate of all time. Shout out to the Nacho Rama at the Village Tavern in Carroll Stream, Illinois.
Shout out. Maybe that's our first sponsor. Do they have good coffee? That's what we're worried about.
They don't serve coffee, but they serve a lot of beer, and they have great nachos and chicken tenders. So
we need that.
Yeah.
So we're going to jump back in here to the third quarter. It is Tuesday night. It is 8 o'clock start time. It's Friend Stream Sports. To anyone out there in podcast land, remember to come out and check us out live on Tuesdays at 8. To anyone watching this after our live broadcast, you can find us on YouTube. Please subscribe to our channel and give us a like, give us a comment. Because the only comments we get are spam.
Yeah, we don't want any spam. I mean, we like spam. It's a little bit, right? Because that means that, we're worthy of getting spammed. But we'd like some comments, things like that.
Everyone
Um,
starts with spam.
everyone starts with spam. And this weekend, we are all starting with the NFL playoffs. First round, kind of the opposite of Jags Jets.
Oh, the absolute opposite of Jags debt. So we're going to resurrect one of our very first segments we ever did here in French Stream Sports. And that is where we're both going to pick our bust, our must, our bust, and our trust for the playoffs. So if you watch the playoffs, this is who Connor and I think you should be dialed into, that they're going to do something special. Hit him. That was a good block. How do you pronounce? Did you see that catch? That Ogasai? What is that?
O'Shaughnessy?
What is his name?
O'Shaughnessy.
O'Shaughnessy. That's awesome.
Had
All
it in
right.
his hands.
Had it in his
Who's
hands,
your
got
must,
swatted
Robert?
out. We are a professional show here. My must for my must for playoffs: Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City Chiefs. If they win, they will be. If they win this game, they will be the only team to host 3 AFC Championship games. The other was the 04-02 Eagles, coached by Andy Reid. They win close games. They blow teams apart if they have to, like the Texans at the beginning of the seasons. They have a great passing game with Patrick Mahomes, 2 top 10 receivers. One of them's a tight end. And their defense gets the job done. They're definitely an offensive-led team, but defensively they can make it work. Because if we remember the Super Bowl, they did well against San Francisco. So I have my must as the Chiefs. Who do you have?
You know, speaking of Midwest, I know very early on I was anti Green Bay. Funny story, Green Bay was the first airport that I ever learned that you can go into security in one terminal and then go into security in another. And that does mean that the Green Bay airport, with all 12 gates, has 2 terminals. But I'm picking the Packers. I think that that number 1 seed is going to be critical. Although there's not fans, man, it's just going to be stinking cold in Lambeau. And even if the Bucks or the Saints get there, right, you've got guys that are going to get cold. You've got some weather elements that Green Bay has used to playing in. And I think that, Green Bay's earned the number 1 seed for a reason, and there's no reason to not think that the Green Bay Packers are going to be making a very, very, very deep run and maybe spending some time in Tampa later this year.
I think that would be awesome. All right, so now we have our bust. Connor, who busts in the playoffs for you?
For bust, I took this as who, outside of the NFC East champs, who is the home playoff team in the NFL most likely to lose? In my opinion, that is the Titans. I think that their defense has had some issues, and I think that playing the Ravens, who just had 400 yards rushing this past game, I think that first off, that game is an offensive lineman's dream. But Derrick Henry versus the multi-faceted running attack of Baltimore. I think that the AFC South champ Titans are going to be most likely to lose and thus bust out of the playoffs.
Okay. That's a big. I'm really surprised in that pick because I know earlier in the season you were a big supporter and opened my eyes to Derrick Henry and everything he was doing. So I'm surprised that you're taking the Titans to bust. Don't throw a pick.
They've got good old, shout out to Luke and J.K. Dobbins, right? You've got Derrick Henry, but you also have J.K. Dobbins and a man named Lamar Jackson and a Baltimore Ravens team that's going to probably be a little bit looser than the high seed that they had last season.
See, that's where I disagree with you, and I have my bust for the playoffs is the Baltimore Ravens. I think if we remember preseason controversy, friends fight sports. Our good old Uncle Colin, as Connor likes to call him. Do we kick the field goal or do we go for it? Take the points. Okay. Good old Uncle Colin liked to say, he said early in his show that the Baltimore Ravens were going to go 16-0. Now they had some COVID things. Lamar Jackson was out. They balanced out their attack a little bit. But I think that, when the story out of the AFC East is the Steelers bounce back, the Browns making the playoffs, and they're just kind of they just kind of exist. I think they're going to fall apart in the playoffs. They don't have
Remember, the Ravens haven't lost since Thanksgiving, since they had all their COVID issues.
this is true, but I don't think their run defense is going to be able to contain Derrick Henry, who is a linebacker or who's a defensive end who runs. Um, so I
Very
really
fast.
think they're not. That my gut take is that the ability the Titans have is just that perfect spoiler seed to just make the Ravens exposed. So I have the Ravens busting. If it was last year's Ravens, I wouldn't be saying this at all. But there's something different about this year's Ravens.
No doubt, no doubt. Well, that now, after our bust, takes us to our trust, Rutledge. Who do you trust is going to make a nice deep run in through these playoffs?
My trust for this year is the Buffalo Bills. Um, Stephon Diggs has really, really been a good addition for them. Really filled up good for them and taken over. Last year when they played Houston in the playoffs, they just looked like they weren't ready yet, and that's why they didn't win that game. But besides that one weird catch by DeAndre Hopkins in Arizona, the Bills really kind of have all the pieces. Josh Allen is firing. That defense is great. They held the Patriots, which you can say what you want about the Patriots this year. They held Bill Belichick's Patriots to under 10 points at a year-end game. So I really think that they're going to make a run, and huge pick for Rutledge. They're going to make a really big difference. So I have the Bills. Who do you trust going into this?
Well, before we go on, or actually, we'll chat about this here. I want to know your thoughts on the Bills Chiefs rematch. I can't wait to hear that. In terms of trust, I'm going to stick NFC. I think that Tampa Bay is really firing on all cylinders. I think that it was in the last month of the year, Tom Brady has 12 touchdowns and 1 interception. I think AB is getting his legs under him. I think, Rutledge, to your point of you can't just, quote, Madden it. You definitely cannot do that. But, these are human beings that do gel together, and it does take time for things to gel together. We got the Mike Evans situation, but I think that this first round against the Washington football team, you might not necessarily even need Mike Evans. I do not put too much faith into Mike Evans, just as you should not put too much faith into your offensive line, Rutledge.
I have a lot of faith in this offensive line. I forget that this is the Jets.
But yeah, I think Tampa Bay is going to be primed to make a nice deep playoff run, and Tom Brady in his kale pajamas are going to make a big time push.
How deep do you think Tampa Bay will go?
I could see them. I could see them going to Lambeau Field, not winning at Lambeau Field, but I could definitely see them making it into the NFC title game, which I believe, if the matchup works out right, would be at Lambeau Field. So, if they have to play them in the second round, I would eventually see them losing to the Packers. If the Packers were out of it, I think that Tampa Bay could very well be playing a home Super Bowl.
They possibly can. They will have to go to Lambeau. They will have to beat the Packers. If the picks just carry without, if the seeds win the way they're supposed to, this offensive line is atrocious, and that was a horse collar. That was a straight horse collar.
You've got fourth down in Syracuse.
I've got fourth down and 35. Yeah, I am definitely. I'm so far from the first down marker that I'm actually playing in the state of New York now with the Jets. That's how far away it is.
You've got fourth down in Buffalo.
Wow. We digress. The Bucks, they would have to beat the Packers at home. They would also have to beat the Saints at home. That's a lot of travel for them. So we'll see how they do. But then they would just come home and play a home game Super Bowl with no
They could
fans.
do their pregame meal at Burns Steakhouse.
They could do it's Connor's favorite. So we have the Bills, and we have our must, bust, and trust to review. I'm taking Kansas City as my must. My bust I'm going to take is the Ravens. and my trust is Buffalo. Connor, review really quick your must, bust, and trust.
Yeah, so the Packers for the must, the bust is going to be the Titans, and I trust those Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
There we go. So that's where we're linking up in the playoffs. Playoffs start on Saturday. Someone that just made the playoffs is, of course, the Cleveland Browns, but they have a little bit of issues here in Cleveland. So first, how do you feel about Cleveland racking up 11 wins and making playoffs for the first time since 2002?
You know, you have enough high draft picks. You go through enough coaches. Eventually, it's going to work out. Kind of like with the LA Clippers. No, hey, shout out to Cleveland, right? They've had to deal with a ton of issues. They've had to deal with a ton of things, and they had to beat a Pittsburgh team that, although Big Ben wasn't playing, neither was Marquise Pouncey. I think still, definitely wanted to win. They weren't playing to lose. That's awesome that Cleveland won, but I think that there's always steps, there's always progressions, right? And the key is to get there before your windows close. And I think that, unfortunately, having to play Pittsburgh in the first round is kind of like, congratulations. You might have beat Pittsburgh with a lot of their guys sitting out. Now here's Pittsburgh that looks more like a buzzsaw with a Kodiak bear on its arms, than the team that you just played. So,
their head coach and signal caller is out due to COVID protocol.
Stefanski got COVIDed.
Pat McAfee had a really good take on this on his show, to where Chuck Pagano was going through cancer treatments. Bruce Arians was supposed to be the play caller, and then Bruce Arians had to be rushed towards the hospital. And they had to put in a different play caller last minute, and they got stomped in their game that they lost without him. So,
well, look at what happened to Clemson against Ohio State.
That's true. Connor and I are both very big believers that leadership matters, and leadership truly sort of drives an impression. So I think Cleveland going in is going to really kind of struggle. And it's going to be bad because, imagine if you're a Cleveland Browns fan. All this stuff happens. You go through the 2020 and you make the playoffs, but then it doesn't work out for you. So we'll see how it all breaks down. We're almost into the 2-minute warning as we get into the last 2 minutes of this show. Any other thoughts of playoff stories you're watching, Connor?
Another pick for the Jags. No, I think that I think the big game, one of the really interesting games, is that NFC West matchup between the Rams and the Seahawks. Two teams that definitely know each other, two teams that are plenty capable, two teams that have real quality head coaches. The edge definitely at quarterback goes to Seattle, but it's not like the LA Rams are slouches at the quarterback position either. So that is a game that I'm really, really excited about heading into this weekend.
I will say, as a Seahawks fan and being biased, I am a little nervous because the Rams do always seem to be able to put it together when it matters. And Sean McVay is a great coach. I think he's going to be a really great NFL coach for a very long time. So that'll be a really good game. Some things in the comments to share is Luke has a Packers-Bucks NFC title game. I believe I saw also in the comments someone called out a AFC title game of Chiefs-Bills. So we'll see how it all sort of shakes down. But I think now, Connor, as we go into the last 2 minutes, it's time for us to work on our not-so-rush this week picks. So let's take it through and talk about some of our picks for the week. So let's start with the championship game. Who are you taking for the championship game and why?
Here's why I'm picking the Tide. I do think that it's going to be this is going to be a really good football game for sure. But I do think that Alabama can be very, very physical in a way that Clemson just wasn't, and we kind of forgot that. I think that there's going to be a ton of points scored. I will pick the over, but no, Alabama to win because they can not only get you over the top with now Heisman Trophy winner Devontae Smith, but Najee Harris can also literally jump over you. So going with the Tide.
I'm also going to take Alabama, but it's going to be a close game. This is not going to be one that Alabama runs away with, which will be interesting to see how their players respond because they've been running away with everything all year long. Ohio State is fast. They made Clemson's safeties look like they didn't know what they were doing, and pretty much all 6 of the throwing touchdowns they had was Ohio State receiver outruns Clemson safeties, ball gets thrown deep, touchdown. So it'll just be as you said when we talked about games last week, it will be all about the athletes in the jerseys and not just the jerseys on the field. I am taking Alabama. I think it's going to be close. I think it will be a high-scoring affair, so I'm with you. I'm also taking the over.
So next up, so that's the Natty, but what do we think about some NFL playoffs? With first game, Colts-Bills.
I'm taking the Bills. I feel really good about this Bills team. Like I said, if they didn't have that weird catch by DeAndre Hopkins in that last game against the Cardinals, they would be a lot farther than they were. So I have the Buffalo Bills.
I too am going Bills, and I think that it has more to do with, unfortunately, that'll end the game. Yahoo!
Sam Darnold throws a Sam Darnold pick off his back foot just into the end zone near nobody. As Connor seals up Rutledge's last second attempt, and Connor has a 9-3 lead of Jacks versus Jets.
I'm going with the Bills over the Colts. I think, and that has to do with the big time quarterback disparity of Phillip Rivers not being as good as Josh Allen.
I agree with that. Next we have Rams Seahawks. I'm obviously taking the Seahawks. I am a loyal 12. I think Russell Wilson and DK Metcalf will connect. I think this will be really to show, can the Seattle defense slow down the Rams offense? That'll be the big X factor, but I think Bobby Wagner and crew will make it happen. Who are you taking?
I'm going to go Seahawks yet again because the quarterback can make such an impact and such a difference. And I think that Jamal Adams will be leading that defense to make Jared Goff and whoever's playing quarterback for the Rams very uncomfortable. So picking the Seahawks, but very, 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 very close.
Luke and Steven also picked the Seahawks. Moving on, we have Ravens-Titans. Connor, who do you have?
Said it before, going Ravens. I think that the run game of Baltimore is going to exploit the Titans' defense greater than the run game of Tennessee is going to exploit the Baltimore defense. But a lot of pick the over on rushing yards if that's
so many rushing yards. I'm going Titans. Derrick Henry. That's all I need to say. I don't think Baltimore has it. I think Lamar Jackson gets a little exposed, but I'm going all Titans on this one.
There you go. Next up, we have Bucks versus the football team.
I'm taking the Bucks because you don't pick against Tom Brady. It would be a great story to see Alex Smith and the football team make it, but this Bucks team is starting to seem like it gels and it's starting to seem like it works. So this will be a good first cold weather test for them to travel, but I'm taking the Bucks.
I'm also going with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
The Tampa Bay. That's good. Did you write that? That was good. That was good. That should be a T-shirt.
Yes.
Could be merch.
Could be some merch. So next up, we've got Bears versus Saints.
I'm going Saints. I picked the Saints early in the season to make some type of run. They're banged up. They don't look great. They're not as explosive as we thought they would be. But New Orleans Saints. I see them taking the Bears. The Bears are too broken.
Yeah, Bears are in a. It's like, congratulations, Bears, you made the playoffs. Here is a nuclear bomb that you have to try to defuse in 4 seconds. So Saints are going to be marching on to the next round.
I agree. Last game we have Steelers Browns. I really want the Browns to win. I really do. I don't think it's going to happen. I think that ragtag sandlot group of guys they need the right leadership in order to make them kind of rattle off and do it. And I think without their head coach and play caller being there, Baker Mayfield's going to try to do too much. He's going to get rowdy, and they're going to get ahead of themselves. And I think the Steelers are going to show them what a football team looks like.
Yep, Steelers, they've been there before. The Browns could be primed for a nice run next year, but this is just, it's steps. This is the first step, is making it, and I think that the team and the culture have been there time in and time out will come through for the Steelers with the victory.
Definitely put it out there. Luke is taking the Saints. He's also taking the Browns.
Upset alert.
Right, upset alert from Luke. And then Steven's taking the Steelers in a heartbreaking close loss for the Browns. I think that sums it up best. You're right. They made it. The Browns, they made it. Congratulations, Cleveland. But you're not there yet. You tasted what it feels like to play a whole complete good season, but now it's time for the real boys to play.
And now it's time for Connor to continue his winning streak.
I know, Connor, you keep giving it to me here in Madden. In the bowl picking, in the Madden, 2021 is not my video game year. You must be practicing when I'm not around.
Much to the chagrin of my wife, that might be true.
Connor's got sick of losing, so he's been putting in some time. Rutledge has been riding the coattails of his arrogance like a bad Nick Saban team. Well, with that, it's been our show. Remember to check us out on YouTube, subscribe to us, follow our podcast. Thank you for coming out to Luke and Steven on this great episode of Friend Stream Sports. And I'm Rutledge.
I'm Connor, and don't forget to invite your friends.
Invite your friends. Thank you for coming. Have a great night.